The arrival of the Cathar was heralded not by thunderous booms or blinding flashes, but by a silent, geometric perfection appearing against the backdrop of Jupiter's swirling storms. Their vessel, an obsidian shard of impossible angles, exuded an aura of cold, calculated efficiency. Humanity, after centuries of listening to the cosmic silence, finally had an answer. And that answer, it turned out, was deeply unimpressed. Their initial communications were polite, if clinical. The Cathar were a collective, their individual identities subsumed into a singular, logical consciousness. They valued efficiency, predictability, and the eradication of superfluous variables. When they observed humanity's broadcasts, our art, our music, our passionate debates, they registered bewilderment, then something akin to pity. Your species operates under the influence of volatile neurochemical fluctuations, their designated liaison, a being designated Cathar Prime, stated during a virtual meeting with the United Earth Council. His voice was a synthesized monotone, devoid of inflection. These emotions, as you term them, appear to be significant drivers of your actions. They introduce irrationality, instability, and a marked inefficiency in decision-making processes. Councilman Alistair Vance, a seasoned diplomat with a knack for bridging cultural divides, attempted a counter-argument. But emotions are what make us human, Cathar Prime. They drive our creativity, our compassion. Cathar Prime interrupted, his digital avatar tilting its head in a gesture that, to human observers, felt unnervingly akin to condescension. Compassion, while theoretically beneficial, often leads to suboptimal outcomes. It prioritizes the individual over the collective, fostering sentimentality where logic dictates otherwise. Creativity, while occasionally producing novel solutions, is a haphazard process born of undisciplined thought. Your emotional responses are a demonstrable weakness, hindering your potential for true progress. This sentiment permeated every interaction. The Cathar shared their scientific advancements, breathtaking leaps in energy manipulation and material science, but their tone remained one of detached observation, like a surgeon dissecting a fascinating but ultimately flawed organism. They offered their technology with a stipulation: that humanity strive to achieve their own state of emotional equilibrium, to transcend the primitive impulses that held them back. Many humans chafed under this thinly veiled judgment. The artists felt insulted, the philosophers dismissed, the lovers and the grieving treated like subjects of a curious but ultimately regrettable affliction. Yet the pragmatic benefits of the Cathar's technology were undeniable. Clean energy solved the climate crisis, advanced medical treatments eradicated diseases, and new materials promised a future of unprecedented comfort and safety. Humanity, for the sake of progress, swallowed its pride and attempted to navigate the Cathar's emotionless world. Dr. Elias Thorne, a xenosociologist tasked with understanding the Cathar collective, found their unwavering logic both fascinating and unsettling. He spent countless hours analyzing their communication patterns, their societal structures, their very thought processes. They operate on pure data, he'd explained to his colleagues, running a hand through his perpetual disheveled hair. No biases, no gut feelings, just cold, hard facts. It's impressive in a terrifying sort of way. Chief strategist Captain Rhys Morgan, a man whose calm demeanor had seen him through countless crises, struggled with the Cathar's assessment of humanity. He understood the logical appeal of their arguments, but he also knew from years of battlefield experience that emotions were not simply weaknesses, they were a complex and powerful force. He'd seen fear drive soldiers to feats of incredible endurance, anger fuel desperate defenses, and even grief inspire unwavering determination. He just couldn't articulate it in a way that the Cathar, with their rigid parameters, could understand. The uneasy peace lasted for 5 years. 5 years of scientific exchange, of awkward cultural interactions, of humanity trying to prove its worth to a species that fundamentally saw it as flawed. Then came the incident on Europa. A Cathar research outpost, studying the Jovian moon's subsurface ocean, went silent. Initial scans showed no signs of malfunction. A follow-up team, dispatched by the Cathar, met the same fate. When a joint human-Cathar investigation team arrived, they found a scene of utter devastation. The outpost had been ripped apart from the inside, its metallic walls twisted and melted. The Cathar researchers were done. The culprit was a species unknown, aggressive, and possessing terrifying bioweapons. The Cathar, caught off guard, responded with their usual calculated efficiency. Their defense platforms engaged, their warships maneuvered with precision. Their targeting algorithms were flawless. But they were being systematically outmaneuvered. The new enemy, designated the Kryll, were unpredictable, their attacks seemingly random, their tactics fluid and chaotic. It was Dr. Thorne who first realized the flaw in the Cathar's logic. During a joint strategy session, as the Cathar presented their meticulously planned defensive maneuvers, Thorne blurted out, "They're baiting us!" Cathar's prime, present via holographic projection, paused. "Elaborate, Thorne." "Their attacks. They're designed to elicit an emotional response, fear, panic. They're forcing us to react impulsively. Look at the patterns." Thorne gestured at the tactical displays. "They attack civilian targets first, knowing we'll prioritize their defense, even if it strategically weakens our position. They're exploiting our empathy, our desire to protect the vulnerable." A ripple of digital processing passed through Cathar Prime. "Your hypothesis suggests an understanding of emotional states in the Kryll. Their biological structure indicates no such capacity." "Maybe they don't feel them," Captain Morgan interjected, his voice firm, "but they understand ours. They're using our emotions as a weapon." The Cathar struggled to comprehend this. To them, emotions were a chaotic variable to be eliminated, not a predictable force to be exploited. Their simulations, based on purely logical enemy behavior, proved increasingly inaccurate. The Kryll didn't fight logically. They fought with a savage, unpredictable ferocity that mirrored the very emotions the Cathar disdained. The first major engagement, the Battle of the Kuiper Belt, was a disaster for the joint forces. The Cathar's rigid formations were easily flanked by the Kryll's swarming tactics. Their reliance on precise calculations left them vulnerable to the Kryll's sudden, irrational maneuvers. Human ships, however, fared somewhat better. Their captains, driven by a primal urge to protect their crews and their home, took risks the Cathar's programming would never allow. Commander Jasper Cole, piloting his destroyer, the Intrepid, found himself separated from the main fleet, surrounded by Kryll fighters. Fear, a cold knot in his stomach, threatened to paralyze him. But then he saw the feed from another human vessel, the Valiant, exploding in a ball of fire. His fear morphed into something else, a white-hot rage. He roared orders to his crew, his voice cracking with fury. He threw the Intrepid into a series of impossible maneuvers, fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire for vengeance. He took down 3 Kryll fighters in quick succession, his shots guided not by algorithms, but by an instinctive understanding of their movements, a visceral reaction to their aggression. "Report," he barked, his voice hoarse. "We're taking heavy damage, Commander," his weapons officer, Sergeant Miller, yelled back. "Shields at 30%. "Push it harder," Cole snarled. "They think they can take us? We'll show them what humans are made of." The Cathar observed these human actions with growing bewilderment. Their sensors registered the illogical maneuvers, the erratic firing patterns, the sheer reckless abandon of the human pilots. Yet they were achieving results. The Kryll, accustomed to facing opponents who followed predictable strategies, were thrown off balance by the humans' emotional volatility. As the war escalated, the pattern repeated itself. The Cathar's cold logic struggled against the Kryll's unpredictable savagery, but the humans, fueled by a complex cocktail of emotions, began to adapt, to anticipate, to even predict the Kryll's seemingly random attacks. Ethan Riley, a young tactical analyst working alongside the Cathar, noticed something during the analysis of Kryll attack patterns. They're targeting areas with high emotional significance, he realized, his brow furrowed in concentration. Monuments, cultural centers, places that would provoke outrage and a desperate response. He presented his findings to Cathar Prime. They're not just trying to inflict damage, sir. They're trying to provoke us, to make us fight emotionally. The Cathar processed this information. This aligns with Thorne's earlier hypothesis regarding the Kryll's understanding of human emotional states. However, their own lack of such capacity remains illogical. Maybe they've observed other species, Ethan suggested. Learn to exploit this weakness. But what they don't understand is that our emotions aren't just a weakness. They're also a strength. He pointed to a series of successful human counteroffensives. Look at this battle. The Kryll expected us to fall back, to protect Earth. But Commander Hayes, knowing they would anticipate that, launched a preemptive strike against their staging point. It was a gamble, driven by anger and a desire to take the fight to them. And it worked. The Cathar began to grudgingly acknowledge the validity of Ethan's observations. They started incorporating human emotional profiles into their simulations, factoring in the likelihood of rage-fueled counterattacks or desperate defensive maneuvers born of fear. Their strategies became less rigid, more adaptable, incorporating elements of human intuition and even, dare they admit it, emotional reasoning. The turning point came during the siege of Mars. The Kryll, in a massive coordinated assault, overwhelmed the joint defense forces. The situation was dire. The Cathar command structure, faced with overwhelming odds and lacking the emotional capacity for improvisation, began to falter. It was then that Lieutenant Marcus Bell, a young human Marine stranded with his squad in the ruins of a Martian city, defied all logical expectation. His squad was pinned down, surrounded by Kryll warriors. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of ammunition. Fear was a tangible thing, a cold sweat clinging to his skin. But then he saw one of his comrades fall, a plasma bolt searing through his armor. A grief and a blinding rage surged through Marcus. He let out a guttural yell, a primal scream of defiance. Ignoring the withering fire, he charged the Kryll position, his pulse rifle spitting bursts of energy. His squad, witnessing his suicidal bravery, followed without hesitation. Fueled by his rage, they fought with a ferocity the Kryll had never encountered. They cleared the immediate area, creating a temporary breach in the enemy lines. Marcus's actions, broadcast across the tactical network, ignited a spark of defiance throughout the besieged forces. Human soldiers, witnessing his reckless courage, found their own fear replaced by a fierce determination. They fought with the desperation of cornered animals, their actions driven not by logic, but by an unwavering will to survive and to avenge their fallen comrades. Even the Cathar, observing this chaotic yet effective resistance, were forced to reassess their understanding of human behavior. Cathar Prime, in a rare moment of something that might have been awe, stated, "Their emotional responses, they are not solely a weakness, they are a catalyst." The siege of Mars was eventually broken, not by superior strategy or firepower, but by the sheer, unadulterated willpower of emotionally charged humans. The Cathar, witnessing this, began to understand. Empathy allowed humans to anticipate enemy tactics, to understand their motivations, even if those motivations were alien. rage-fueled acts of incredible bravery, pushing soldiers beyond their physical and mental limits. And fear, that primal instinct they had dismissed as a sign of weakness, became a powerful motivator for survival, driving innovation and desperate yet ultimately successful strategies. The First Contact War was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. The Cathar, the stoic, logical race who had deemed human emotions a weakness, were now fighting alongside humans, learning to harness the unpredictable power of feelings they could never truly comprehend. They had come to judge, but in the crucible of war, they were being forced to understand. Humanity's emotions, once considered a flaw, had become their greatest weapon, a force the cold logic of the cosmos could not compute and ultimately could not defeat.